Peace to the family. Peace, love, and light. Greetings, greetings, greetings. Oh, where did I put that at? All right, peace, y'all. Let me get this tie together. Yo. Let me button it all the way up. I get a cup of water. It's going to be one of them days. Give me a second. I'll be right back, y'all. Let me see. This lighting sucks, too. Yes. It's Pablo. I got my joint on today, right? Whoa. Whoa, I got that drip on. Yeah. Look. My shit's silk, too. My shit's silk. I ain't playing with them. My joint's silk. Look, my hair's silky, too. My hair's silky. You know what I'm saying? But my beanie's silky. My beanie is silky. That just ain't regular white. It's Italian silk. Now, I'll be right back. Give me 1 second, y'all. Oh. Peace, y'all. Peace to the family. Peace, love, and light. Welcome back to another episode. All right. This is Mineral Ministries. I am your host, Pablo. This is epilogue 115. And today's presentation is titled One Prayer, One God, Two Prayers. My bad. And we want to ask the very controversial question, who memorializes the fallen shoulders? If there's a separation of church and state, and the state does not ordain the soldiers to go out and fight in the name of God, right? Because there's a separation of God and country. But your first commandment is thou shalt not kill. So, who ordains the fallen soldiers, right? And in times of war, where both people pray to the same God, if there's two prayers and one God, how does God decide to who to shower or who to savor in his favor if both of his children are at war? And we'll ask the same question of Islam, right? If Sunni is fighting Shia, or if it's Sunni versus Sunni, if there's one God and two prayers, how does God decide who gets the benefaction of being, the one that survives the onslaught? What goes into that? All right, so we'll be delving into some of these topics. But we're gonna definitely get a lot more deeper. Today's one of those days, right? And we're definitely going to have a very eventful presentation for you, right? Number 115 is going to be one of them ones. So get yourself comfortable, all right? Get locked in, and we will begin very shortly. Tell a friend to tell a friend. All right. Church is in service. This is Mineral Ministries. We are non-denominational, mostly conversational, sometimes confrontational. And the way that we do scripture over here is we look at the Gregorian calendar date. Today is 5/25. So we're going to go into the book and we're going to read the book the way it's supposed to be read. And we'll derive from that, we'll extract from that the different gems that we need to turn a dead letter religion into a living testimony or a living testament, right? Let's see how it speaks directly to things that are going on in real time in our lives right now. Feel me? So we're going to take a deep dive. And we allow ourselves the discretions to ask the questions that need to be asked, whether the content that we're reading is figurative or literal, because according to the narrative, according to the things that they tell me about, the soul contract, they say that our very existence is contingent and dependent upon whether we understand this contract, the soul contract that it says that we was born into. You know what I'm saying? So I wanna ask the questions that I was not allowed to ask as a child, because they told us that children should stay in the place of a child. But at one point, because they was telling the same thing to adults, at one point, do we have the conversations and do we get to the understanding of what these words entail or they mean? Especially if you tell me that my soul is contingent on me knowing this information, then I should be very studious in it. So with no further ado, I want to get started with today's presentation. All right. Epilogue 115. One God, two prayers. At times of war, when both people are calling on the same God, how does God depend on who saves the favor? Who gets the blessing and who receives the burden? When the slave and the slave master pray to the same God, how does God deal with that? How does God decipher, or does fortune favor the bold? You feel me? Charge your phone, tap here. Nigga, I am charging it. What's the problem? What we doing? Phone? Hold on. Come on, phone. What we doing? All right. I think the phone is charging now. Let's get to it, y'all. So we're going to start in Genesis, right? We always start in Genesis. This is where the book starts off at. So we'll start in Genesis with 525. 525 Genesis. Okay? 525 Genesis. What's going on? Give me 1 second. What the fuck? There we go. All right. 525 Genesis. From Methuselah to Noah. Right? So we're going to be talking about some niggas that's 900 years old, right? From Methuselah to Noah. When Methuselah was 187 years old, he became the father of Lamech. And after he became the father of Lamech, Methuselah lived 782 years and had other sons and daughters. So right off the break, before we even go further, I will ask you, figurative or literal, right? Have you been trained and ordained to believe that what I just said is an actual fact? You know what I'm saying? Would you even allow yourself to attempt to rationalize this information that I'm sharing with you as an actual fact? Or you think that it's something more allegorical? What could they possibly mean by this man lived 900 years old and had babies at the age of 187? But, you know what I'm saying? They telling you that, specifically women, that you're going to get menopause around the age of 50. And, they're telling men that they got low testosterone, and if you don't got a child by this age and that age, you can forget about it. Now, we know that that's not true, because there's plenty of examples, right? I think about Sabi, he had babies up into his 80s, right? So we my bad. We've seen men commit themselves to, pushing the parameters of whatever's being told about procreation. So again, figurative or literal, you know what I'm saying? Let's take a full account into how long this man possibly lived, right? Genesis 5:26. And after he had became, okay, yeah. So Methuselah lived a total of 969 years. And then he died. So they're saying that there's a man that lived on this planet for upwards to 1,000 years. But you see the yogis in India, right? In Indus Kush. And they're showing you a yogi that's almost 200 years old. And the world is baffled. They're like, biologically, how is that possible? So then we run into the conundrum that we often run into, and that is that, religion doesn't hold up to the muster of science. When science gets involved and the intellectual Western mind starts running his tests and utilizing his logic, a lot of this shit falls to the wayside. So how can Christianity exist in the Western world under the threat of logic and reason when a lot of this information is very non-logical? And I'm not taking shots. I'm just saying. I just read you an account of a man who said that they said lived 969 years and then he died. If that's the precedent, then that means that it's applicable and applicable to all men. Or did God come along and change, the lifespan expectancy in the genealogy of men when he did whatever upgrade, human 3.0, whenever that shit happened after Noah? I'm just saying, the whole planet is transfixed in this religious dogma. And when we start asking these questions, people get all in their feelings. And we got to ask the questions. Let's do a cross-reference before we move on. Genesis 4:17. And Cain had relations with his wife, and she conceived and gave birth to Enoch. Hold on. Then Cain built a city, named it after his son Enoch. Now to Enoch was born Irad, and Irad was the father of Muhajiel, and Muhajiel was the father of Methusiel, and Methusiel was the father of Lamech. It's a lot going on. And I had seen some footage the other day, and it was bugged out because they was in Iraq, and they were extracting the treasures of Nimrod out of a vault. You know what I'm saying? Because, again, we're celebrating Memorial Day, but it has been told to me by people who are engaged in the Gulf War, the veterans, and thank you for your service. Salute to the veterans. I have grown in my years, and we'll speak about that sometime today. But they themselves were telling me about, y'all seen the movie Three Kings? Yeah, they was like, yeah, they was going over there and they was looting vaults. You know what I'm saying? They was catching whole entire vaults of gold, palaces full of gold. You know what I'm saying? And they were raiding vaults, but the higher end, of course, of the military excursion or incursion, they were looking for portals, because they said that area of the Mediterranean has the most amounts of portals. And portals are access points to different dimensionality, different frequency dimensionalities. Shout out to Brother Rich and my good brother Sharif Bey. They had an amazing build on Black Magic. Right, I'm gonna give you this individual's name. Y'all might know him. I don't watch Gaia, so I don't know who this individual is outside of this program. But he has some good information. Randy Weitenheimer. Yes, the Stargates. Energy ley lines and portals. So the first formal. Check that out. He was dropping a lot of information, and he was speaking on the ley lines, dragon lines, and portals, weak and strong access points, energetic fluctuations. It's definitely worth checking out. I gave it a 2 thumbs up. You know what I'm saying? Let's go to Exodus 5:23, and that's on Black Magic 363 if anybody's not familiar with the program on YouTube, Black Magic 363, highly recommend that you check that episode out. Exodus 5:23. Exodus doesn't go to 5:25, so we'll take it up into 5:23. Right? The cry of the Israelites. So Moses returned to the Lord and asked, Lord, why have you brought trouble upon the people? Is this why you sent me? Ever since I went to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has brought trouble on this people, and you have not delivered your people in any way. So they're getting into this whole aspect of the contract. I did as promised. Why haven't you delivered? You know what I'm saying? So Moses was bolstered by, quote unquote, his God, right? Even though we keep speaking about this aspect of one God, and even they had the audacity to do this during this time period, because what I'm good at doing is pointing out the nuances, right? I'm gonna show you where a lot of shit don't make sense, and it's not to take us away from it. It's just to charge us up to ask the very necessary questions, because they're telling you that your soul contract is dependent and contingent upon you knowing this information and being able to rationalize and utilize it in a way that's going to save your ass from rapture. Yeah, you better start asking some questions. You feel me? So if there's one God, right, we deal with this whole aspect of a Trinity or a tripartite aspect of God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. That's later in the addition. When Yahweh came around, during this time, Kemet had many gods, right? Indus Kush had many gods. In the Americas, the gods flourished. The Assyrians had gods before that. The Babylonians had gods, and the Babylonian gods were reigning during this time. They tell you that based on the story of Daniel, who was the seer working for Nebuchadnezzar. Yes, and then you have the primordial gods. Somebody, Sono Luminal, right? He's really caping right now for Sophia. So we got the primordial aspects. There's another amazing episode Brother Rich had on his program with Vicky Dilliard, Mama T, Sister Myra, right? I feel like I'm missing somebody. But nonetheless, they were speaking about the primordial gods. They were speaking about, when the matriarch was a predominant force on this planet. And just these words alone stir controversy. I beckon you to do your own research, right? Into Lilith, into Sophia, into Osset, right? And all of these, quote unquote, these temples and these entire configurations of movements that went around. Look up a lot. And I'm not making the Allah accusation. I'm just saying, be very versed in the holistic totality of what deity represented prior to Yahweh, because he's the new kid on the block. He came hella late, and we here speaking on him as if there's one totality, and there's not, right? Because if there was, why would this God have to send Moses to that God to negotiate with those people to let his people go? Why? Where did it happen? Did he vanquish them? Did he destroy them? Because their temples are still standing, their architecture is still up, and their shit was up before yours, and it's higher science than yours. Where's your science that you didn't steal from people to build cathedrals? Because that's not authentically Christian. That's not authentically Catholic. Cathedrals, that was a science that was given to them by the Moors. So where's the evidence of this high science? Because if you can't show me intelligence by way of high science, then how can you be God? Right? Again, no disrespect, but the God of a sheep herder cannot compare to the God of high science. Just can't. Right? So let's keep it moving, right? The cries of the Israelites, that's Exodus. We'll do a cross-reference before we move on. Exodus 7:3 to 7:4. But I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and through I will multiply my signs and wonders in the land of Egypt. Pharaoh will not listen to you. Then I will lay my hand on Egypt, and by mighty acts of judgment I will bring the divisions of my people, the Israelites, out of the land of Egypt. But if in fact at that time you were being the omnipresent and omnipotent and omnipotent God, where's Pharaoh and the gods of Egypt come from? Because they was around thousands of years prior. They were able to establish a stronghold enough where that regency, that place in the planet was strong, right? They were the center of thought and education. How did they rise or raise to this level of prominence? Where was God all this time? Or the God of the Jews, or Yahshua, or Yahweh for that matter, the war God, who sent his people into the bosom of Kemet to be taken care of when he could not suffice and do it for them. But you take the people out of Kemet, march them through the desert for 40 years, and then send them to a land that's already occupied. You double book the Airbnb, and we're still paying for it to this day. I don't get that. Yeah, everybody needs to be on trial. Everybody needs to be brought to question, even God himself. And that's not blasphemous. I'm just saying, right? It's us talking to ourselves about ourselves at the end of the day. Don't get emotional. Leviticus, we had to flip it and go to 25:5 because there was no 5:25 in Leviticus. And you can also allow yourselves in this Gregoria calendar, flip. When something is 25 and they don't got a 25, you can break it down and do a 7. So you could go to 5 sevens or read 5 sevens today if you can't find 5:25s. But today I'm going to invert it and I'm doing 25 fives. So Leviticus 25:5 is the sabbatical year. But in the 7th year, there shall be a Sabbath of complete rest for the land, a Sabbath to the Lord. You are not to sow your field or prune your vineyard. You are not to reap the aftergrowth of your harvest or gather the grapes of your unintended vines. The land must have a year of complete rest. Whatever the land yields during the Sabbath year shall be food for you. You for yourself, your manservant and maidservant, the hired hand or foreigner who stays with you. So in this case, this would be like them speaking to the Cometians and saying the foreigner who stays with you would be a Jew, right? The foreigner who stays with you. For people who's supposed to love thy neighbor, there's not too many stories about the Jews once they had an enclave and they let other people in. They were surrounded by other people because they was always in somebody else's land. So the Amorites, the Hittites, the Jebusites, and all of them people was indigenous to what they call Palestine or that region. It's not like the Jews let them in because they were a cosmopolitan people. It's not like they were the Moors of Spain, right, who ruled for 700 years. And even though they brought Islam to the region, they didn't convert everybody to Islam. The Jews were able to practice Judaism, and Christians were able to practice Christianity, right? They didn't subjugate. They had a cosmopolitan civilization. And even over here, that's what technically it's supposed to be cosmopolitan over here. This was never meant to be a theocracy because America was founded by the majority of deists. They were not Christians. I'm going to write this down. You go look it up. Do me a favor, please. Call my bluff. Deists as founding fathers. And you'd be surprised what the deists are, right? And what their principles are and what they believe in. And once again, you will see how they continuously trick you out of your own bag. They tell you something is evil. They tell you something is demonic, right? Deism is like animism. And animism is what they call paganism. And they was able, once again, to jerk you when you look up to something. Look, this is how the Cassies of the world have found themselves in a situation. And I'm standing on business, and I have to stand on business. Are you a victim or a volunteer? I don't believe in victimhood. Everybody's a volunteer, right? Now, the degrees to which you may volunteer yourself, the extent to which you might find yourself in a hole, yeah, there's levels to that shit, but you a fucking volunteer, right? Everything is participatory. No one is being forced to do anything over here. It's all participatory. It's all contractual. And then we cry. But you got to know what you're getting into. And you have to stop looking at people and idolizing someone's stature, right? Because that's how you're putting yourself in a subservient position to ultimately be put into game. Because this just sounds like a bad case of gorilla pimping to me. So yeah, it has to be explained, especially to young men and young women out there. You can only be a volunteer in any situation in life, not a victim. Be mindful of the decisions that you make. Even for your ass to be accosted and snatched somewhere, you have to make a decision to end up going somewhere to get snatched. You made a decision to leave the house today, or you made a decision not to leave the house today. Everything is contingent upon a decision that you make or don't make for yourself. Let's be clear, right? So we can be more responsible for these decisions in life that we make for one another, for ourselves, in the way that they impact other people in our lives. Please don't take this the wrong way, right? I'm not being accusatory or not saying that I don't care about what happens to people in situations that they find themselves in, but volunteers are not victims. That's the creed. And then this whole aspect of the sabbatical year, to farmers, they're giving you very informational, good farming information about what it's going to take for soil remediation, right? If you grow a particular crop, do you have to give the soil a break in order for it to remediate and remineralize itself, right? And many things are like that. So this sabbatical aspect of us taking time to reset and recharge ourselves, right? To get ready for another lengthy season of harvest, right? You can apply these principles to life. Case in point, Exodus 23:10. For 6 years you are to sow your land and gather its produce, but in the 7th year you must let it rest and lie fallow, so that the poor amongst your people may eat from the fields and the wild animals may consume what they leave. Do the same with your vineyard and olive groves. So they're telling them in the sabbatical year, don't necessarily sow your harvest, but if you grow, let's say you got a watermelon patch, right? Case in point, 1 acre watermelon patch, you can make $100,000, they say. But right, so don't be ashamed of the fact that we eat watermelons or grow them. That's a good business. We need to own that business. We need to be the top dogs in that business. We need to be doing $100,000 an acre. You know what I'm saying? Regularly, watermelon is a good fruit. But let's say you ran the watermelon patch on the 7th year, you would not harvest it for financial gain for yourself. That's just one. Yeah, they like, yeah, community, you get to eat. It's like a Jubilee year. It's food everywhere, right? But also, there's definitely a technique of remediation. You know what I'm saying? 2 years on, 2 years off, where you switch to crop. But that on that 7th year, you should deal with a level of soil remediation, put the minerals back in the soil, turn the soil over, and then get back to it. Let's keep it moving. Deuteronomy 5:25, Moses intercedes for the people. Yeah, this is heavy Moses energy going through these first, through the Torah, right? And you said, behold, the Lord our God has shown us his glory and greatness, and we have heard his voice out of the fire. Today we have seen that a man can live even if God speaks with him. But now, why should we die? For this great fire will consume us, and we will die if we hear the voice of the Lord our God any longer. For who of all flesh has heard the voice of the living God speaking out of the fire as we have and survived, right? So they were saying that this moment was such of a precedent. And there's this concept that when it's like, okay, so you have a concept of an apparition where you see a spiritual force, or what we call a spirit, right? So there's an apparition. And we've already said this. Christianity is contingent upon two supernatural occurrences with apparitions. So if you don't believe in magic, how can you be a Christian? I'm gonna ask, if you don't believe in the paranormal, how could you be a Christian? And I'm asking this in jest. I'm like, this is me being, you niggas need to DM West Huff to get an answer out of him? You can't speak for yourself? If you don't believe in the supernatural, how can you be a Christian? Because Christianity is contingent upon two supernatural occurrences. Paul, right, seeing the apparition on the road to Damascus and converting from Saul to Paul. Remember, all Christianity comes out of the mind of Paul. It's called Pauline Christianity for a reason. They can fight and complain in my comment section all they want, right? But Google this shit. It's called Pauline Christianity for a reason, because the nigga created the fucking religion out of his mind. He was freestyling. I'm not making this up. You're just not doing the research. And then the second supernatural occurrence is almost identical to the T of Paul riding an ass on the road to Damascus, and he runs into a spirit, an apparition, knocks him off the ass. He gets scales on his eyes. All of this is allegorical, by the way, right? He gets scales on his eyes, and then he makes the conversion from Saul to Paul, and he goes from being a Christian killer to the person that fucking creates Christianity. How can you kill something or people who didn't exist before you did? I don't understand. But he starts putting on for the Christians and starts his mission in 44 AD at Antioch. And now we got Pauline Christianity, because in order for him to encompass and grow the body of Christianity, he had to go and allow Gentiles to come in by adopting their quote unquote paganistic rituals of Eucharist being the main one. Eucharist, the eating of the flesh. They got that from some tribes' pagan religion or pagan tradition, and they brought it into there so they can get more bodies in. This is the difference. This is why the quote unquote, the evangelicals, the Protestants, they don't fuck with the Catholics because they don't do the Eucharist, amongst other things. But one of the main is the Eucharist, the vampire rite, if you will. Just stripping right here, but so, and then the second apparition was Constantine, right? On the road, riding an ass. He was on the road to war. Constantine was an emperor at this time. He dealt with empirical conquest, hegemony. You know what I'm saying? He was conquering for empire. He did not believe in religion, and Rome was very hostile towards Christians. Same shit as Paul. Okay? And then he gets confronted by an apparition while he's riding a donkey. He gets knocked off the apparition, right? And then out the clouds, the apparition comes and it says, conquer in this sign. And the sign that they show y'all is the cross, but it's really the sword, because he creates Christendom and then fuses what? Church and state become one. What was the state? The state was the empire of Rome, the empirical conquest of the Roman Empire. And what was the church? The church was the church. Now it's the Church of Rome. And that's what you got today, right? Which is a enclave, a sovereign enclave onto itself. Vatican is run by Vatican City and is considered to be its own sovereign nation. Case in point, when I run up in these Catholic churches here, whether it's the St. Louis Cathedral or whether I'm running down on St. Patrick's Cathedral, I'm literally in Rome when I'm inside of those buildings. That's why I got issues with them to this day, because I was up in the Vatican turning over tables and shit like that. And they don't take that light. They don't take that light. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, shout out to them. I don't take it either. I don't take disrespect. So they're speaking about these apparitions. When God appears as an apparition, people normally die. You don't get to see the face of God, right? Or hear the voice of God and live to tell about it, right? God killed Aaron's sons. He had 2 sons who was Levitical priests. Now again, this is on y'all to figure out whether this shit is real or literal, whether I'm telling one hell of a story or not. This is how they tell this shit. I went to seminary school to learn this, to get back to y'all, to get y'all the skinny. This is how they teach it. So he had 2 sons. Aaron had 2 sons who were Levitical priests. And they had strict instructions on how to set up the altar of animal sacrifice, because that's what you have to utilize. That's the currency that God utilizes to get his attention, right? He needs his sacrifices specified. And the sons got it wrong. They didn't burn the incense, or they didn't put something in the right place. And God came into apparition and he killed his sons. So, yes, they're not used to people seeing or hearing the voice of God and living to tell about it, right? Because that voice is so pronounced. You technically should be able to survive after hearing the voice of God. Definitely not after seeing God. It's just too much. Hebrews 12:18. For you have not come to a mountain that can be touched and that is burning with fire, to darkness, gloom, and storm, to a trumpet blast, or to a voice that made the healers beg that no further word be spoken. For they could not bear what was commanded. If even an animal touches the mountain, it must be stoned. So I remember when we would go into the mountains and there would be fog and mist when we get up there, and then we would get to, praying and chanting, and I would say this shit is about to clear up, and then the clouds clear up. Happened about 4 times. And prior to that, I know I could do that because I used to expertly make it stop raining, and we used to bring the sun out at events. So I ain't talking about no shit that I did singularly. Would the real motherfucking witnesses of Pope Pablo please stand up? Because we was doing this in public for a reason, in front of people, to give them the confidence. Coming from up north with all of this confidence that we had, we would come down here and give people confidence. And I'm like, yo, if you're on the land, why you not tapped into the rest of, let's say we live in a dome. Let's say we live in a dome, nigga. Your magic's supposed to be that much more effective, right? Right? That much more effective. You know how many times I've done shit like that? It's not even fancy anymore. Like, and that my emphasis is like, if a nigga's not showing you something and just talking about it, why are you still listening? Because this community gets caught up on niggas talking, right? And the shit be so eloquent, right? Where's the demonstrators at? Where's the real time? Where's the spookism? Like, where's the magic? Joshua 24:5. Or let's do, wait. All right, so Joshua probably didn't go to 25, so I'm skimming it. 5:24, that was yesterday, the 144th day of the year. We can still talk about it. And to Isaac I gave Jacob and Esau. I gave Esau Mount Seir to possess, and Jacob and his son went down to Kemet. Then I sent Moses and Aaron, and I afflicted the Commissions by what I did there, and afterward I brought you out. When I brought your fathers out of Kemet, and you reached the Red Sea, the Commissions pursued them with chariots and horsemen as far as the Red Sea. And figurative or literal? You think that really happened, y'all? You think there's any evidence of that? What's the allegory there? Judges 5:25, the song of Deborah and Barak. We back here again. Most blessed amongst women is Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite. Most blessed of tent-dwelling women. Yeah, she was the baddie in the tent-dwelling, arena. You know what I'm saying? When it comes to tents and tent dwellers, yeah, Heber was that. He asked for water, and she gave him milk. In a magnificent bowl, she brought him curds. She reached for the tent peg, her right hand for the workman's hammer. She struck Sisera and crushed his skull. She shattered and pierced his temple. Jesus Christ. That shifted real quick. Where did she go with that? How you went from? I'm sure there's more to the story, but we're gonna keep it moving. No, let's do a cross reference before we move on, because I need to know what happened here. Genesis 24:18. Drink, my lord, she replied, and she quickly lowered her jar to her hands and gave him a drink. After she gave him a drink, she said, I will also draw water for your camels until they have enough to drink. And she quickly emptied her jar into the trough and ran back to the well to draw water until she had drawn water for all of his camels. Yeah, she was saucing him up. And then she hit him over the head. It sounded like the three ruffians. She hit him in the temple, and she hit him in the throat, and she hit him on the crown for the secrets, right? Shout out to the Masons. That's 1 Samuel 25:5. David, Nabal, and Abigail. While David was in the wilderness, he heard that Nabal was shearing sheep. So David sent 10 young men and instructed them, go up to Nabal at Carmel, greet him in my name, and say to him, long life to you and peace to you and your house and to all that belongs to you. Yeah, so they was hollering at him. They was getting at him. Right? Say, yeah, I see you lit. What's good, my nigga? Pull up. We could roll up and put one in the air. I don't know if that's how they were speaking back in the day, but, you know, that's what it sounded like he was saying, what he was doing. But anyway, let's go to the next one. Let's do a cross-reference before we move on. Let's see. Some of the best products in there. Genesis 43:11. Then their father Israel said to them, if it must be, then do this. Put some of the best products of the land in your packs and carry them down as a gift for the man. A little balm and a little honey, spices and myrrh, pistachios and almonds. Take double the silver with you so that you may return the silver that was put back into the mouths of your sacks. Perhaps it was a mistake. Take your brother as well and return to the man at once. So yeah, they came bearing gifts. You know what I'm saying? Whoever he was lit. Let's keep it moving. 2 Samuel 5:25. 2 victories over the Philistines. Yeah. As soon as you hear the sound of marching in the tops of the balsam trees, move quickly, because this will mean that the Lord has marched out before you to strike the camp of the Philistines. So David did as the Lord had commanded him, and he struck down the Philistines all the way from Gibeon to Gezer. Right? So the Philistines would be the modern day Palestinians. You feel me? And they're striking them down. Let's do a cross-reference. Joshua 6:2 to 6:5. And the Lord said to Joshua, behold, I have delivered Jericho into your hand, along with its king and its mighty men of valor. March around the city with all of the men of war, circling the city one time. Do this for 6 days. Have 7 priests carry 7 ram's horns in front of the ark. Then on the 7th day, march around the city 7 times while the priests blow the horns. Let's do another cross-reference. This one is important. This one is very important to the political situation that's taking place right now over there. You know what over there is, right? Let's do this cross-reference. 1 Samuel 15:3. Now go and attack the Amalekites and devote to destruction all that belongs to them. Do not spare them, but put to death men and women, children and infants, oxen and sheep, camels and donkeys. So I saw some footage on my timeline the other day, and it was after there was an attack in DC at the Jewish Museum. 2 people unfortunately lost their lives. You know, rest in peace to them. And immediately they over politicized this situation, and there was footage coming out of Israel, and the people on the ground were speaking about how they have a disdain for the existence, for the incarnate existence of Palestinians, and that the only way forward was to eliminate their children and any future remnants of them. And this is what they were openly saying on social media, and this stuff was being broadcast. And I can't even speak 1/4 of that if I felt it on my account. And like, who would openly say such a thing? And these was women saying this on camera, and it was children, like, you know, like collegiate age, college age children saying this. And it seemed to, and then it was being echoed by Netanyahu, that they are painting the Palestinians as Amalekites. And Amalekites are a tribe that God ordained, quote unquote, the Jews to eliminate and exterminate, because this particular tribe of the Amalekites, they attacked them when they were going through the deserts and that 40-year excursion to the promised land, the Airbnb that was double booked. Yeah, they got attacked by the Amalekites. And as a result, they were giving permission from their God to eradicate his children. It's like if the planet was populated by all of these people who were not God's chosen, how did this happen? And why did it change your heart all the way after God died, as in the form of Jesus, for Paul to come and to make it a Gentilian thing? You know what I'm saying? Where you opened up the house to everybody. Now we all your children. How do you rectify when your children fight? One God, two prayer. How does God rationalize who to give or to save the favor on when his children are fighting? When it's Christian versus Christian, when it's Muslim versus Muslim, when it's melanated versus melanated, when it's indigenous versus indigenous, right? How does God referee that? How do you officiate and decide who gets the blessing and who receives the burden? Feel me? As a parent, how do you decide when your children fight? Do you be like, let the best child win? Yeah, a whole lot of explaining to do. No disrespect. All right, we're going to do a cross-reference. Then we're going to move over to the next one. Joshua 7:19. And interestingly, before I do that, because I want to touch note here, we've been speaking about the Sinners movie, and I was speaking about the characters. You have hold on. Smoking Stack, right? But Smoking Stack had real names in the movie. Real characterization in the movie of Smoking Stack, right? Just like, and they were, there were Moors, right? Because Sammy Moore and Elias Moore, right? I believe it's Elias and Elijah was the two names of the twins outside of Smoking Stack, because they got real names. That was their nickname, right? Elias and Elijah Moore is the name of these caricatures in this movie. We ain't going to keep going into how Michael B. Jordan needs to send a check already and stop telling us that you got some other goddamn twins for consultation. And these niggas is squares. It ain't got nothing to do with no red and blue or Moorish energy. But, I'm just trying to find this correct, because I just don't want to be freestyling, even though I did a whole lecture on this the other day. I know it's Elijah and Elias. So interestingly enough, we find that the shooter in this incident in D.C. at the Jewish Museum, right, who they say was a quote-unquote domestic terrorist, right? Of course, we find out that this individual's name is Elias as well. Interesting. I got a lecture coming up on the 31st with Wesley Muhammad. I don't know if I'm going to choose this one to do it, but I got to just do a recap of everything that's happened since the movie Sinners, all of the mystical occurrences that coincide and tie directly into, you know, the the Hollywood juju of this movie. We're gonna talk about it. We're gonna talk about it. So Joshua said to Achan, my son, give glory to the Lord, the God of Israel, and make a confession to him. I urge you to tell me what you have done. Do not hide it from me. It is true, Achan replied. I have sinned against the Lord, the God of Israel. This is what I did. When I saw amongst spoils a beautiful cloak from Shinar, 200 shekels of silver, and a bar of gold weighing 50 shekels, I coveted them and took them. They are hidden in the ground inside my tent, while with the silver underneath. Yeah. Yeah, shout out Ryan Coogler. He a Gemini. His born day just passed. You know what I'm saying? He a March Gemini like Biggie. And we know K-Dot got a born day coming up. I think he's a 16th. He's a June 16th Gemini. Like Carlo. Shout out to my brother Carlo. One of the best 44 resonators in the business. 1 Chronicles 5:25. And salute to all of the Geminis, Gemini season. I salute you guys, creative genius. Yesterday, Saturn's went into Aries, and I think today, Gemini goes into Mercury, or Mercury goes into Gemini, which means, yeah, nigga, we talking, we sitting up here talking, we communicating. I might have like a 5-hour live. Oh, that's the Papoose energy. Gemini shit. The minute we went into Gemini season, this nigga did a 3-hour live. Gemini shit. The half tribe of Manasseh. These were the heads of their families: Epher, Ishi, Eliel, Azriel, Jeremiah, Hodaviah, and Jadiel. Like I keep telling y'all, this shit sounds like Atlanta names. Circurtius, Virtuous, Quantavius, Quanravius, right? All of those is Atlanta, Georgia. Atlanta got its own lost tribe. Shout out to all of the Quantaviuses out there, though. I think y'all is lit. You know what I'm saying? I don't know what y'all parents was going through during that time period, that epoch. What part of the cosmos, what quadrant of space they've been pulling from? Because, you know, they said that the mother is the mini prophetess, because she hears the whispers about what name to name you niggas. You know what I'm saying? And she ain't missed yet. I didn't be, nigga, Quantavius. And the Quantavius don't even be knowing each other. They're not even related. How did your mother come up with Quantavius? In the late 90s and early 2000s, because these is the... Now, I can't even say that, because all of the, like the Migos and all of them, they like Quantaviuses and all of that. Yeah, they just the lost tribes, man. They just the lost tribes. But they were unfaithful to the God of their fathers, and they prostituted themselves with the gods of the people of the land, whom God had destroyed before them. So the God of Israel stirred up the spirit of Pul, king of Assyria, right, to take the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh into exile, and he brought them to Hala, Habar, Hara, and the river of Gozan, where they remain to this day. Once again, they're showing you, you know how the U.S. be like, we don't negotiate with terrorists, and then they went and accepted planes from Qatar. They got this whole thing called Project Esther, where you can be prosecuted and fined for $1 million for making a post that appears like you're supporting Hamas. They call you a Hamas sympathizer, and I bet in about 6 to 8 months, they're going to be qualified to even drone you if they think that you are a support of, you know, the Palestinians or what have you. But this nigga goes to Qatar, who he deemed to be a terrorist state, and receives a $400 million plane. Is he not violating Project Esther? Is he not violating his own project, which is Project Esther? Anyway. 2 Chronicles 25:5. Amaziah's victories. Then Amaziah gathered the people of Judah and assigned them according to their families to commanders of thousands of hundreds. And he numbered those 20 years of age or older through Judah and Benjamin and found 300,000 chosen men able to serve in the army, bearing the spear and the shield. He also hired 100,000 mighty warriors from Israel for 100 talents of silver. So they was building up big armies, right? Massive joints. Massive joints. 2 Chronicles 17:14. We're just going to skip through this real quick. These are the numbers according to the houses of their fathers. From Judah, the commanders of thousands. Adnah, the commander, and with him 300,000 mighty men of valor. Next to him, Johanan, the commander, and with him 280,000. And next to him, Amasiah, son of Zikri, the volunteer for the Lord, and with him 200,000 mighty men of valor. So on this Memorial Day weekend, as we memorialize the fallen soldiers, understand that, specifically when we speak this biblical talk, and specifically in the Old Testament, Jehovah is the God of war. And that entire book is about military warfare. It's about military escalation and excursions and things of that nature. And then they de-escalate when they get to the New Testament. And then they introduce this character called the Prince of Peace. And all of a sudden, they forget that Yahweh is a God of war, but somehow he manifested himself as a better half on his planet as the Prince of Peace. But he's the king of war in heaven, but the Prince of Peace on earth. And his acolytes and the people who have chosen to uphold his standard as the standard bearers, they don't know that he's just the Prince of Peace. And these niggas are still running around the planet waging war. How you going to wage war in the name of the Prince of Peace? Right, yeah, they pushing P. How you going to push P at the tip of a barrel of a gun or the tip of a sword, but then tell me that you represent the Prince of Peace? I'm just so confused. Everybody's been confusing me these days. I'm just so confused. Job 5:25. Eliphaz continues, God blesses those who seek him. You will know that your tent is secure and find nothing amiss when inspecting your home. You will know that your offspring will be many, your descendants like the grass of the earth. You will come to the grave in full vigor, like a sheaf of grain gathered in season. I love that. That's very poetic. You will come to the grave in full vigor. You know what I'm saying? Embrace death. Run to it. Be a champion when you go down. Like, don't die like a coward or a sucker. They die 1,000 deaths. But die with vigor and valor. Die on your shield. Happy Memorial Day. Psalms 127:3-5. Children are indeed a heritage from the Lord, and the fruit of the womb is his reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior, so are children born in one's youth. Blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. He will not be put to shame when he confronts the enemies at the gate. You got to build up your progeny, you know what I'm saying, to defend your property and your legacy, and having children is a beautiful thing. Psalms 25:5. To you I lift up my soul is the name of the chapter. Show me your ways, O Lord. Teach me your paths. Guide me in your truth and teach me, for you are the God of my salvation. All day long I wait for you. Remember, O Lord, your compassion and love and devotion, for they are from age to age. Keep it moving. That was Psalms we was in. Right? Shout out to Psalms. Let me just do a cross-reference before I leave. John 16:13. However, when the Spirit of truth comes, he will guide you into all truth. For he will not speak on his own, but he will speak what he hears, and he will declare to you what is to come. So this concept of universal truths is very interesting. And yesterday, while listening to the Valheimer, brother Valheimer on Black Magic, he was dropping it. He was saying some very interesting things. And it was interesting because I was going through something with somebody accusing me of something that I don't agree with, because I don't know where they're coming from with their accusations. So they got to explain themselves. And I don't think that they yet know that they're having this whole conflict and conversation with themselves in their own heads about things that they perceive to be true. And truth is not a shared reality, unfortunately. Right? It's not a shared reality. And this individual, he framed a reference, a term, and I think that it's applicable, right? Real slick, you know what I'm saying? They got language, boy. Woo. Let me tell you. They got language. And that's what we call the Judas paradox, is there's no victims, there's only volunteers. The slick name for that is called the Judas paradox, right? And that beckons and harkens to the question of who was the bad guy in this narrative, because there could be no Jesus without Judas. So was Judas not fulfilling his divine mandate of being the executioner, of carrying through, making the very move that's necessary? It ain't come as a surprise, nigga. You think God don't know? He ain't write the script. Then if he wrote the script, then we don't have free will. See, there's these conundrums. There's these conundrums that just cancels everything out. If the script was already written, then we don't have free will. Then Judas is an NPC. He's not a character who came into the game with free will. He's someone who was born to fulfill that duty, and he's the hero of the narrative because he told that nigga get on. And if he ain't telling him to get on, then you couldn't get on. So you should be applauding Judas. He's the hero in the story. He did what the devil couldn't. Nigga, get on. You gonna get up out of here and stop being a regular human. Get your ass back to being God, right? Judas. Judas Priest is what they call him. Shout out to the Judas. That's Scorpios, right? We are the sign of, or the caricature of Judas in as the 12 disciples, because all of those caricatures are indelibly connected to astrological signs, right? Just like the tribes are. The tribe of Dan. Dan is Scorpio, but the disciple is Judas, and that's Scorpio. Shout out to the Scorpios. Shout out to my brother, right? Because his real name is Judas Thomas. My brother's middle name is Thomas, too. And I always told him, if I'm Jesus, you got to be Judas. But don't get me sacrificed. Don't get me sacrificed. I'm trying to find a name zones of operation. You give meanings to things, and you define things in your own mind, nigga. We don't share the same motherfucking beliefs about the shit that you telling yourself. We don't. So now you got to explain yourself. Because now you put your foot in your mouth. Telling me what you think based on shit that's going on in your head, based on how you read. Because, we be reading shit and we read it in our own language. And sometimes we read things and they sound off because we don't know how to read. Right? Or we're subjective. When you pop up looking for something, chances are that's what you're going to find. It don't make it right. It don't make it right. So we go through a lot of that, and that's where a lot of the arguments on social media come from. And I'm a very cryptic writer, you know what I'm saying? Like I sometimes I'm very direct and sometimes I'm not direct. I give myself poetic license to write however the fuck I feel. When I feel like it. You know what I'm saying? And hell yeah, I be baiting a lot of motherfuckers in. It's a step-by-step process. I don't take a direct shot all of the time. Sometimes I put a little bit of bait out, see if you're going to bite it. And then I squash you. But that ain't for everybody. That's for the people that's being baited. Right? Social media is a battlefield too. Don't be fooled. This is where we battle to control the narrative as well. It's a fucking battlefield. And if you don't believe me, nigga, how you think the president got in this office? This term, they utilize social media to create a culture war to control the narrative. Beat the brakes off of the woke. declared a whole war on them and drove them niggas under the floorboard. And the only one that's still keeping the lights on is Kendrick. So what we doing here? Proverbs 5:23, avoiding immorality. The inequities of a wicked man can entrap him. The cords of his sin entangle him. He dies for lack of discipline, led astray by his own great folly. Hosea 4:6. This is a very famous quote that's popular amongst our people. We love quoting this one. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Because you have rejected knowledge, I will also reject you as my priest. Since you have forgotten the law of your God, I will also forget your children. We be like missing these quotes. We don't. Yeah, the so-called richest guy brought one of the biggest social media platforms specifically for that reason, for $44 billion to control the narrative and put the opposition on game and be very subjective and tell you what you can and can't say. And as a result, let me see. Damn, I don't think I know how to do that yet on this phone. All right, let me go to the next one. Discipline is harsh for him who leaves the path. He who hates correction will die. That's Proverbs 15:10. Discipline is harsh for him who leaves the path. Right? All right, so let's think about the path being the Force. Like Star Wars, right? The Force is in you, and Anakin left the path, right? That quote unquote right path. He deviated, and his ways were very difficult. You know what I'm saying? And very dark. Feel me? And he did not like correction. Yes, and now that we're dealing with this aspect astrologically of what's called Saturn and Aries, it took place yesterday, and it's going to be there until 2028. Now, I got personal aspects in my chart to speak directly to this, and I'll share that to y'all because you might be going through it as well, right? This aspect, this transition is all about corrective action. It's about you getting whooped into shape. If you don't have corrective actions, if you don't know how to move and navigate, it's about letting things go. You know what I'm saying? It's about doing them the right way instead of doing them the way that you've been used to doing them. And oftentimes that could translate to you doing, it might be the longer, arduous, more tactical approach, right? You might have skipped a step, and that step might be super vital. So whatever you did that you thought that you got completed, that you ain't get away, yeah, you're going to be forced to repeat that. That's where we at right now, unfortunately, fortunately, right? So Isaiah 5:25, woe to the wicked. Therefore, as a tongue of fire consumes the straw, and as dry grass shrivels in a flame, so their roots will decay, and their blossoms will blow away like dust. For they have rejected the instruction of the Lord of hosts, and despised the word of the Holy One of Israel. Therefore, the anger of the Lord burns against his people. His hand is raised against them to strike them down. The mountains quake, and the corpses lay like refuse in the streets. Despite all this, his anger is not turned away. His hand is still upraised. He lifts a banner for the distant nations and whistles for those at the ends of the earth. Behold, how speedily and swiftly they come. Maybe, they be talking that talk. Deuteronomy 28:15 as a cross-reference before we move on. If, however, you do not obey the Lord your God by carefully following all his commandments and statutes I am giving you today, all these curses will come down upon you and overtake you. You will be cursed in the city and cursed in the country. Your basket and kneading bowl will be cursed. This is my thing, though. Once again, right? Do we got free will or don't we? Right? We have free will as long as it exists within the parameters of these commandments. So what about all these people that break the commandments? What about governments that go against the commandments? What about the fact that church and state are separate? But we're here celebrating the Memorial Day weekend. All of them soldiers that went to fight had to kill. And it's no secret that that's what the military does. So why is that institution not forsaken by the church or by God himself if it turns people into breakers of commandments, into defilers of the law, right? Why do they say kill them all and let God sort them out? Why is this country propagating their military as if it's a Christian military and they're crusading? Why did the president of this country say that in 2001 or 2002 when he sent these people to the Gulf and said that they was fighting a crusade against Islam? How is it an entire war god in the Old Testament, but the first commandment is thou shalt not kill? And they got armies of 300,000. No, they had armies that they compiled that probably totaled into like 750,000 if you counted the numbers the right way. Jeremiah 5:25, judgment proclaimed. They have not said in their hearts, let us fear the Lord our God, who gives the rains, both autumn and spring and season, who keeps for us the appointed weeks of harvest. Your iniquities have diverted thieves from you. Your sins have deprived you of my bounty. For amongst my people are wicked men. They watch like fowlers, lying in wait. They set a trap to catch men. Right? Whole lot of fuck going on. Isaiah 59:2 before we move on, because this just sounds cold. But your iniquities have built barriers between you and your God, and your sins have hidden his face from you so that he does not hear. Right? So what if a particular people are in such inequity, right, that God has turned a deaf ear on their prayers? What if there's a people running around thinking that they are directly tied and tethered to the Most High, but they are in his ire, right? They are receiving, the they're receiving his back, right? He don't want to rock with them. He's fed up with them. He's like, nah, I ain't rocking with you niggas, man. Y'all out of order. You know what I'm saying? Ain't fuck with y'all. Fuck with y'all. What happens with that? Okay. So we'll keep it moving on to the next one. Oh, we ain't touched this. This is Ezekiel, and this is inversion. This is 25:5, not 5:25. It's 25:5. A prophecy against Ammon. Okay. Therefore, I will indeed give you as a possession to the people of the east. They will set up their camps and pitch their tents amongst you. They will eat your fruits and drink your milk. I will make Rabbah a pasture for camels and Ammon a resting place for sheep. Then you will know that I am the Lord. For this is what the Lord God says. Because you clapped your hands and stomped your feet and rejoiced over the land of Israel with a heart full of contempt. There he goes and talks his talk. We're going to go to Daniel's 5:25, right? Take it back to Daniel interprets the handwriting. Okay? Therefore, he sent the hand that wrote the inscription. He sent the hand that wrote the inscription. Now this is the inscription that was written. Mene, tekel, parsin. And this is the interpretation of the message. Mene means that God has numbered the days of your reign and brought it to an end. Cold-blooded. Cross-reference. Daniel 2:28. Before we move on. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries, and he has made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what will happen in the latter days. Your dream and the visions that came into your mind as you lay in your bed were these. As you lay in your bed, O king, your thoughts turned to the future, and the revealer of mysteries made known to you what will happen. And to me this mystery has been revealed, not because I have more wisdom than any man alive, but in order that the interpretation might be made known to the king, and that you may understand the thoughts of your mind. So, and we look at this aspect of the children of the Most High, they all have received provisional gifts of magic, right? They're seers, they're daydreamers, soothsayers, right? They lay hands on people, you feel me? And they create, they're able to manifest, right? Their magic manifests, changing stabs into snakes and all of this cool magic tricks. This was a time when magic was the predominant, quote unquote, if you will, religion of the land. You know what I'm saying? Who has the best magic wins. Kind of like what they showed you in Remember the Times with Michael Jackson and Eddie Murphy. Amos 5:25, the day of the Lord, but let justice roll on like a river and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. But you bring me sacrifices and offerings 40 years in the wilderness, O house of Israel. You have taken along Sakkuth and your king, and Kaiwan, your star god, the idols you made for yourself. No, God has a very deep-seated issues with his children that he cannot keep under control, right? But he endows them with magic every now and then to pop their shit and to be, you know, his representatives in a world full of magic, full of other gods whose magic is stronger than his. This is a bad position to be in. And it exists to this day. Acts 7:42. But God turned away from them and gave them over to the worship of the hosts of heaven, as it is written in the book of prophets. Did you bring me sacrifices and offerings 40 years in the wilderness, O house of Israel? That's a question. You have taken along the tabernacle of Moloch and the star of your god Rephan, the idols you made to worship. Therefore, I will send you into exile beyond Babylon. So that verse, they clean it up. So we know Sakkuth, right, is another word. Sakkuth is another word for Moloch, right? And Moloch is the owl god of the Babylonians, who they allegedly feed babies to, but this the same owl that you find on the back of the dollar, because it's the god of currency. So again, God is still being rivaled to this day by quote unquote foreign gods, right? That have been put in place by children or people that belong to his alleged children that are part of a whole nother priesthood that are still paying homage to Babylonian gods. What part are we missing? And everybody else is cosplaying like the Egyptians. What part are we missing? And nobody want to be Africans. What part are we missing? Matthew 5:25. Anger and reconciliation. Leave your, and when I say nobody want to be Africans, I want to make a specification that there's evidence, evidentiary arguments to speak to a lot of these origin stories taking place in Central and West Africa, as Congo being, the site and the location possibly where a lot of this stuff takes place. When you're speaking about the preeminence of magic all through this book is a book of magic, and it's a book of people who are not confident in their magic against other entities and deities' magic, And if you've ever been to the continent, even to this day, you feel me? That's what their gangbanging is about. Who got the best magic? What house is most prominent, right? Who's getting the best tribute? Feel me? We could build that up. Matthew 5:25, anger and reconciliation. Leave your gift there before the altar. First go and reconcile to your brother, then come and offer your gift. Reconcile quickly with your adversary while you are still on the way to court. Otherwise, he may hand you over to the judge, And the judge may hand you over to the officer, and you may be thrown into prison. Truly, I tell you, you will not get out until you have paid the last penny. That seems like that's a Diddy bar. That's a Diddy bar. It might be a Diddy bar. You know what I'm saying? Might be a Diddy bar, you know? He settled civilly before he got to that federal court, but there's something that he didn't do, right? They will ultimately land his ass in prison where he has to pay up to his last penny because they're going to fleece him. They're going to fleece him dry. How you going to pay that woman $20 million and still end up in court? You didn't properly reconcile. You put the money out, but you didn't make the apology. You didn't make it personal. You know what I'm saying? You discounted the human factor. And as a Scorpio, of course, you think that material gain and material wealth can solve all of your problems. That's the shit that we believe as Scorpios because we are tethered to Taurus, which means big money. It means investments. It's sex, money, murder is the Taurus Scorpio axis. And that's all we're looking at. Shout out to Yusef L. That's a legend. A whole legend. And yes, before you go to court, you better incorporate. Well, let me say that because I cannot tell you what you should be doing. But I knew that they were dealing with sorcery in the courtroom. So goddamn it, I dealt with my sorcery, and he who has the best sorcery wins. He who could cast the best spell wins in court. Goddamn it, because all of that legalese and legal jargon is spell work. And you got to go in there and crack that spell because somewhere in that spell, they're saying that you're not a living human being and you're property. And that's how they're going to deal with you and your numbers and shit like that. So you got to figure out how to break that spell. And you got to cast a spell that's more superior. And you got to be able to do it in a way in which you could get it off into the court record and they don't catch you and be like, court, cut that shit in. Like me throwing shit at you and the CEOs jumping on you, all type of crazy shit to try to stop the inevitable. So yeah, these are all arenas of sorcery, and I don't want to sound spooky. I'm just saying, Psalms and Proverbs, goddamn it, written on a piece of black paper, putting on your left shoe. That's sorcery. Peace, God. That's sorcery. Let's not get it twisted. Your nana was doing sorcery. When they sitting down and praying for your ass in front of their altar, that's sorcery. Y'all never seen the blue book that y'all use before you go to court to do this? Mark 5:25, the healing touch of Jesus. So Jesus went with him, and a large crowd followed him, pressed around him, and a woman who was there had suffered from bleeding for 12 years. Whew. She had borne much agony under the care of many physicians and had spent all she had, but to no avail. Instead, her condition had only grown worse. Right? Her condition had only grown worse. Leviticus 15:25, when a woman has a discharge of her blood for many days at a time other than her menstrual period, or if it continues beyond her period, she will be unclean all of the days of her unclean discharge, just as she is during the days of her menstruation. Any bed on which she lies or any furniture on which she sits during the days of her discharge will be unclean, like her bed during her menstrual period. Anyone who touches these things will be unclean. He must wash his clothes and bathe with water, and he will be unclean until evening. They like, and that nigga gotta soak in milk and do a facial with honey, and then he has to lay in vinegar for 8 hours. Y'all didn't see that. They was writing that in invisible. I'm sorry. I picked up on some invisible ink. They was doing the sorcery shit. My bad. Believe that. Luke 5:25. Jesus heals a paralytic. Alright? Yeah, no Diddy. No running red lights no more. No Diddy. But so that you may know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins, he said to the paralytic, I tell you, get up, pick up your mat, Get your ass home. And immediately the man stood up before them, took what he had been lying on, and went home glorifying God. Everyone was taken with amazement and glorified God. They were filled with awe and said, we have seen remarkable things today. I used to do that shit. Skid Row. I used to dress out. I had my all white on. I had my staff. They used to call me Moses when I was down there. I'd be like, get your ass up. You know you ain't goddamn paralyzed. Them niggas get up. I have amazing conversations with the homeless population, especially the ones that are like dealing with aspects of schizophrenia and they be acting like they're crazy. I get right to them, speak to their spirit, or speak to that demon inside of them and stir it up and get those people back regular again. It's not hard to do. You just got to have an unprecedented amount of conviction when you speak and really believe the shit that you're saying. And I be like on love time for real when I'm amongst some people. I be damn near in tears because they're some of the strongest people ever. And I really see more of humanity in them. You know what I'm saying? I don't speak to them out of contempt. I speak to them out of love. You know what I mean? I do think that they're the strongest people on the planet. First of all, sleeping on concrete is not easy. Second of all, deciding to stick around even, because some people just give up the ghost. It's like, all right, you failed in what's considered to be society, but they still hold on. To me, that's an unprecedented amount of strength. And I'm going to tell you something about them. Because I will go feed mad early, right? And LA is weird because it's on the West Coast, so it's 3 hours behind the East Coast, right? These niggas don't move on the West Coast until like 11 or 12 o'clock. Like, even the Chinese, they don't open their stores until later. And then they open it for a little while, like until 6 or 7. This was on Crenshaw at least. And then them niggas be gone, right? When you go to Skid Row, them people is out of their tents and they on their grind before 8:30 a.m. No one is laying around and still sleeping. There's activity and movement. You know what I'm saying? When the motherfucking sun breaks down there, people is, on the most part, they're getting up and they're getting to it. They're not shiftless, sedentary, lazy people, contrary to popular belief. These are very active people. And I wouldn't dare say that they were healthy. They're fortified in the elements. That's a different level of health. They're not, they wouldn't pass a logistical health test, but goddamn, they're survivors. They're survivors. And they're different. You know what I'm saying? In a good way. I'm saying all that to say that these are not the people who we should be looking down on. And I'm not advocating that everyone do as I do. I just go out of my way to make sure that I'm helping in any way that I can, whether it's feeding, whether it's giving out of my power, or taking time just to hear them out or speak to them. I fucks with them. You know what I'm saying? And my spirit of this Obatala, this all white, I was always told, and as a priest in the priesthood, that you will be tested and they will send someone who's the incarnation of an Obatala in the form of a homeless person, right? Older man with gray hair, and you don't know who it is. So you have to treat them all equitably because you just don't know which one of them is an angel. Now, y'all free to believe whatever it is that you want to believe in. And some of the things that we believe are the things that help us navigate, right? Whether it's a belief or not. It's help us navigate. Case in point, I've traveled, right? I just got a license the other day for the first time, like forever. And I'm almost 50. And I have driven from Atlanta to New York on more times than I can shake a stick at. But I never had a license. Ever, right? Never in my life. And I utilize visualization techniques taught to me by Bobby Hemmett in 2001. And please don't try this at home necessarily. But he'd always say, envision Anubis on your roof of your car, right? With the ears up and the tail out. and you'll be invisible on the road. Nigga, I drive 90 plus miles per hour on them highways. I be hydroplaning doing 100 sometimes. I ain't never been stopped. Ever. Not once, because I've never had a license. Not once. Ever. So, the things that we believe, like belief is strong. Yeah, and I do not advise that you try this at home. But you should try utilizing driving with Anubis, because you guys have your license and you guys are legitimized. I'm saying in the midst of us traveling on these highways and these throughways and dealing with these race soldiers and things of that nature, utilize that visualization technique, and also visualize when you leave, see yourself arriving where you're going already. And then that's the mental reference that you keep in your head as your navigation. You're creating this tunnel or this pocket that you just exist within, and you're being covered cosmically by, again, even if it's let's say you're being cosmically covered by your own imagination. Let's just leave it there, right? But you strengthen and fortified yourself that you've already gotten from point A to point B. Now, I heard the doc on the program say something about that the other day, and that was very interesting. He said something about he was able to hack navigation through the throughways and travel to and fro. I'm making it, I'm dragging it out and not making it sound as cool as it is, because you know this brother, he made shit sound very cool, and he said that he traveled 400 miles in 4 hours by hacking a program, a mental program, understanding the relationship between spatial and temporal realities. And I get it, because he says space is aspect in 8 markers and time is aspect in 9 markers. Nigga, to me, I understand that as the law of 44. Space equals 44, which is 8, and time equals 144, which is 9. So I'm like, I'm already there. I'm the one that told niggas that you can go from Arizona, right, Phoenix, and you can fly to Atlanta, which is Phoenix, and it will only take you 3 hours to create a 6-hour trip. Nobody's explained that to me yet. 3 hours to go to 2 locations that are located on the 33rd parallel line, that both have red clay and both have the Phoenix iconography as the mainstay of their motherfucking states, right? But the only thing with Phoenix and Arizona is they don't change daylight savings. So they are a fixed location. They're on mountain time. But if you travel from Phoenix to Atlanta, it's going to take you 3 hours, but that's a 6-hour trip along the 33rd parallel, especially if you go straight. So yeah, shout out to homie, you know what I'm saying? We need to do more of our homework. And yeah, anyway, so John 5:25. Truly, truly, I tell you, whoever hears my word and believes him who sent me has eternal life and will not come under judgment. Indeed, he has crossed over from death to life. Truly, truly, I tell you, the hour is coming and has now come when the deaf will hear the voice of the Son of God, and those who hear will live. For as the Father has life in himself, so also he has granted the Son to have life in himself. So are they one and the same, or are they different? Because if God was down here, who was keeping the goddamn lights on up there? Or he split himself into 2 or 3? That's a lot of God activity for one part of you to die in. Acts 5:25. The apostles before the council. When the captain of the temple guard and the chief priests heard this account, they were perplexed as to what was happening. Then someone came in and announced, "Look, the men you put in jail are standing in the temple courts teaching the people." At that point, the captain went with the officers and brought the apostles, but not by force, for fear the people would stone them. Right? Hold me down, son. They escaped like the New Orleans prisoners and shit, but they went to Jackson Square and they was teaching in the Citadel. It's like, nah, nigga, keep running. How you getting caught? Where you getting caught at? Y'all ain't having Look, lesson to prison escapees, right? If you escape from jail, nigga, do not stay in the same city that you escaped from. Jesus. We got to keep it moving. We're running out of time. Romans 5:21. It didn't go to 25, but I still wanted to do this. The law came in so that the trespass would increase. But where sin increased, grace increased all the more, so that just as sin reigned in death, so also grace might reign through righteousness to bring eternal life through Christ. They just freestyling at this point. 1 Corinthians 15:56. The sting of death is sin. The sting of death is sin. How about the sting of sin is death? The sting of death is sin, and the power of sin is the law. But thanks be to God who gives us the victory through Jesus Christ. This is Paul being poetic. He's just talking at this point. He's just talking. And it's poetic. And we are enthralled in the prose of the poetry. But they're not saying nothing. 2 Corinthians, because we still born in the goddamn sin. And the world is full of it. It was a bad deal. Ambassadors for Christ. Therefore, we are ambassadors for Christ, as though God were making his appeal through us. We implore you on behalf of Christ, be reconciled to Christ. God made him who knew no sin to be sin on our behalf, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God, or the lambs. Oh, Jesus Christ. All right, Isaiah 53:4, and this is beautiful poetry. This is beautiful poetry. Surely he took up our infirmities and carried our sorrows, yet we considered him stricken, struck down by God, and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was pierced on the side. He was crushed for our iniquities. No, he was crushed for the punishment that brought us peace was upon him, and by his stripes we are healed. We are like sheep have gone astray. Each one has turned to his own way, and the Lord has laid upon him the iniquity on us all. So did he like haphazardly walk into? Did he blindly walk into? Did he not know that Judas was going to do what Judas did? Is he God or isn't he? Did he not foresee this? Did he not write the script? Or did he volunteer into a script that he didn't know the ending of the play out? Right? Did he get victimized and get pierced in the side by a Roman soldier? So while we don't know the bloodline and the name of that Roman soldier so they can be vanquished, they the first layer of hell? Huh? Them niggas at the door of the shit like Peter is for heaven? Who's at the door of hell? Is it Hitler? Who is it? Who is it? Because he was putting on for the Catholic Church. So who is it? Galatians 5:25, living by the Spirit. Those who belong to Christ have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires. Since we live by the Spirit, let us walk in step with the Spirit. Let us not become conceited, provoking, and envying one another. So right there, Remy Ma, right there, you was out of league, you was out of pocket. And Pap, if you wrote, I'm conceited for Remy, nigga, we need to talk. Ephesians 5:25, wives and husbands. I'm going to do a whole live later about the niggas who write ratchet lyrics for women, and then women get all of the blame for ratchetness. And it's the niggas who've been writing the Little Yachty, Biggie Smalls, Papoose. Who else we got? Young Berg. Who else we got? There's a few of them. I'm going to need to talk to y'all niggas. Probably even Kid Cudi, man. Wives and husbands. Now as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit to their husbands in everything. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, to sanctify her, cleansing her by the washing with water through the word. Through the word. Right? 1 Peter 3:7, husbands, in the same way, treat your wives with consideration as a delicate vessel and with honor as fellow heirs of the gracious gift of life, so that your prayers will not be hindered, Don't violate her. and then think that you're going to get the blessings and the benefactions if you are coupled with her as your better, as your half and the whole and all of that shit. I don't want to use better half and all of that because, sometimes you could be 51%, sometimes she could be 49 and vice versa. So you both got to be that for one another. You know what I'm saying? 1 Thessalonians 5:25. Final blessings. The one who calls you is faithful, and he will do it. Brothers, pray for us as well. Greet all of the brothers with a holy kiss. Pause. 1 Timothy 5:25. A charge to Timothy. The sins of some men are obvious, going ahead of them to judgment, but the sins of others do not surface until later. In the same way, good deeds are obvious, and even the ones that are inconspicuous cannot remain hidden. I'm going to read that again. The sins of some men are obvious, going ahead of them to judgment, but the sins of others do not surface until later. In the same way, good deeds are obvious, and even the ones that are inconspicuous cannot remain hidden. So let me give you a case in point of what they mean by something like that. So you got these Republicans that are touting themselves as America first and Christian conservatives, Christian nationalists really, right? Or just Christians, period. But then they pass legislation called a big, beautiful, bold bill. And they got these provisions with cut out, quote unquote, support to their neighbors, right? To people that are their constituents that need federal funding or support, let's say, to buy diapers or baby food and things of that nature. But they put provisions in that stuff to cut it out of, it won't be available in like 07, 27, 29. All of these things are going to be cut out. So years down the road, they're going to get up there and tout to you that they believe in American values and traditions and family, this and all. But then they cut all of these programs out, and they're going to be able to hide their face later on down the line once this shit kicks in and they're already up out of there, or they have touted what they did in a positive for so long, then when the negative come out, they're already going to be up out of there. That's the shit that they talking about. That's the shit that they talking about. Evil on a whole nother level. 1 John 5:21, concluding remarks, because we're about to end. And we know that the Son of God has come and given us understanding so that we may know him who is true, and we are in him who is true, in his Son, Jesus Christ. He is the true God and eternal life. Little children, keep yourselves from idols. And with that being said, keep yourself from Caesar Borgia, who is the first DEI hire. And it is super dangerous to weaponize Christianity by giving us a version of a white Christ, knowing damn well that you can't get the truth if the depiction is false. Nigga. The first DEI hire is Caesar Borgia, who is the son of Pope Alexander VI, who created what's called the Intercaterra that we know today as the Doctrine of Discovery, which was issued on May 4th, 1493, that became the only binding legal document that enforces white supremacy that's still enacted today is the Doctrine of Discovery. And that is the document that they utilized to conquer the indigenous realms in the world in the West, period. And they took the picture of Caesar Borgia that was created by Michelangelo and said that this is Jesus. And that was a DEI hire because it could not have been Jesus. So our people are suffering from mental myopia today because of that fucking lie. And these cocksuckers is in the White House talking about white supremacy and Christian nationalism because they have propagated the lie that their quote unquote Lord is some white man with stringy hair and blue eyes. And that reinforces their concept of supremacy. Let's go into the Quran before we leave, right? 5:25, because this ain't just about the Bible. Let's go into the Quran. Al-Ma'idah is the 5th chapter, right? Or the 5th surah. Let's go into the 25th ayat, if you will. Yet they said, O Moses, still, we will never enter as long as they remain here. So go, both you and your Lord, and fight. We are staying right here. Moses pleaded, my Lord, I have no control over anyone except myself and my brother. So set us apart from the rebellious people. Allah replied, then this land is forbidden to them for 40 years, during which they will wander through the land. So do not grieve for the rebellious people. So even in the Quran, chapter 5, right, or Surah 5, ayat 25, deals directly with the same correlation that I just read to you in the goddamn Bible, dealing with Genesis, dealing with Moses and them talking about coming up out of Kemet, you feel me, and Pharaoh. I ain't making it up. It's right there, right? Congeniality. And let's go to the circle 7. Let's not even end in the Quran. Let's end with the circle 7. Islam Wars. Chapter 5. After the feast, the homeward journey, the missing Jesus, the search for him, his parents find him in the temple. He goes with them to Nazareth, the symbolic meaning of the carpenter tools. The great feast of the Pasch was ended, and the Nazarenes were journeying towards their homes. And they were in Samaria, and Mary said, "Where is my son? No one has seen the boy." And Joseph sought amongst their kindred who were on their way to Galilee, but they had not seen him. Then Joseph, Mary, and the son of Zebedee returned and sought through all of Jerusalem, but they could not find him. And Mary asked the guard, had they seen Jesus, a little boy about 12 years old? The guard replied, "Yes, he is in the temple now, disputing with the doctors of the law." And they went in and found him as the guards had said. And Mary said, "Why, Jesus, why do you treat your parents thus? Lo, we have sought 2 days for you. We feared that some great harm had overtaken you." And Jesus said, "Do you not know that I must be about my Father's work?" But he went round and prayed and pressed the hand of every doctor of the law and said, "I trust that we will meet again." So he was in there debating, banging out with them, you know what I'm saying? And his parents, who were his earthly parents, obviously had no idea that his own parents didn't know that this nigga was a child of God, because they was fearing for him at the hands of man, right? And at 12, that's when he went to Kemet, the missing years of quote unquote Jesus, right? From 12, I believe, to 18, because his ass got back there and he started his mission, and it lasted, his ministry lasted for 44 months and 4 days. Because yes, Jesus is a 44 resonator, right? And that book was written by another 44 resonator called Paul, who started his mission in 44 AD in Antioch. So this whole book is about the energy of the 44, but Jesus is really a 44 resonator, undeniably. And I've covered this so many times, but I might do a post today and just lay it out, because we got this whole 144 energy taking place. But look, that's my time, man. I love y'all. I just wanted to show and prove once again that the skill set is undeniable. It do what it do. We're able to weave every narrative and tell, especially when it comes to the 3-headed religions. You know what I'm saying? I could do this with my eyes closed, because I know where they all derive from, and I know what the you know, I know where they intersect, my nigga. I could do this shit. I could do this shit hanging upside down. I could do this shit hanging upside down with my eyes closed. And that's no disrespect. That don't mean I'm a know-it-all. I'm just Pope Pablo, and you know what I'm saying? And I'll be damned if I ain't on it. When I'm on it. And when I'm off, I'm off. But when I'm on, I'm on. So, again, thank you to everybody. Appreciate y'all. Yes, it was a powerful word. And I feel that, there's going to be a lot of engagement in the following days, specifically dealing with these cases. You know, we heard so much about adultery and, you know, it's just so much prostitution and adultery. All of these things are speaking about stuff that we cover in this book every weekend, every strong and every Sunday. We hit on all of these topics, and now we're seeing the breaking down of the people, right, who are spoken of in this book, who are under judgment. I got accused the other day of attacking Black Americans, and I'm like, I don't necessarily know where, because a person was making a point about a post, and I'm like, I'd be attacking a bunch of people, but you got to show me where I was attacking Americans, Black Americans. But now I think about it, I'm like, my whole situation is about explaining to them that they're under judgment and why and what can be done about it. So if you feel personally attacked, you know what I'm saying? Again, that shit is personal. But I should be allowed to speak to my people, my nigga. We are fucking under judgment. And it shows, right? But we're also the people who have been promised providence. So it's the job of the prophets to point things out. And I don't gotta do that shit the way that you like me to do it. And I don't have to be polite while I'm doing it. No pun intended, pun intended. So with that, I want to say peace, y'all.